Hey y'all, I'm Carrie,
I'm Momo.
and this is Monstrous, where the stories are strange, the shadows run deep, and the tea is always a little dark. Listener discretion is advised. Monstrous covers true crime, violence, and other unsettling subject matter that may be difficult for some listeners. All right, welcome back to another week with us. It's our last light-colored week for a few weeks. So, you got anything?
No,
Updates, information, insights?
no.
Okay, we're just gonna dive in then. Are you ready?
Hey, let's do it.
All right. Now, before we dive in, I want y'all to picture something, okay? Not a monster hiding in the dark, not a killer, not even a ghost story. Picture a classroom, a factory floor, a school hallway where one person suddenly goes down and then another and another, and nobody can quite explain why. Now, picture that panic spreading from person to person without anyone touching each other, without anyone breathing in a toxin, without any obvious physical cause at all. That's what makes this kind of story so unsettling. Because the threat doesn't always come from outside. Sometimes it starts in the room with you. Now, if you've listened to our last couple of episodes, whether it was the dancing plague of 1518 or the meowing nuns, you all what?
Those episodes just cracked me up.
If you've already listened to those, then you already know that this kind of thing isn't as rare as it sounds. It happens in different places with different symptoms, but it has the same pattern. Today's episode is 3 cases of those same mass hysteria. And just wait. Because if you thought those 2 were crazy, these ones are just as wild. So if you're ready, Mama, you're hooked in.
I'm hooked in.
So it's one thing for a single person to experience something unexplainable. It's another when it happens to dozens or even hundreds of people. Because at that point, you can't just write it off as a weird thing that happened. You can't just say that somebody imagined it. And here's the thing, events like this aren't just something from history. Versions of mass hysteria have happened in schools, workplaces, entire communities, all in modern times. Entire classrooms have developed the exact same symptoms: fainting, tics, uncontrollable movements with no clear medical explanation. And like, I think it's on Netflix. Like, there's a show about it,
They done some good stuff.
about a oh my God, about a modern, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a show, I'm pretty sure it's on Netflix, that, I haven't watched it yet, but I've seen clips of it where they talk about it's a classroom, and these girls in this school start developing these weird tics, and nobody knows why. Yeah, it's very strange. Okay. So it's this that connects all the cases that we're gonna talk about today. Different places, different people, but it leaves you with the same question. What happens when something invisible spreads through a crowd and no one can stop it? It's not a virus, it's not a toxin, but it behaves like one. And the first place that we're going to start is Tanzania, where one small outbreak of laughter turned into something that no one could contain. So, this one is known as the Tanganyika laughter epidemic in 1962. So, it begins in a classroom, January 30th, 1962. In a small boarding room in Kashasha, Tanzania, 3 girls start laughing. At first, it doesn't seem like anything unusual. Kids laugh in class all the time. A joke is told, a funny glance, a moment that gets away from everybody. But this doesn't stop. The laughter keeps going. Minutes turn into hours, and the girls can't regain control. A teacher tries to quiet the room. She raises her voice, calling for silence, but the laughter keeps cutting through the room, echoing off the walls of what should have been a quiet classroom. At some point, it stops being funny. Other students start shifting in their seats. Some are nervous, some confused, some trying not to laugh themselves. And then they do. Now, here's where things start to get really strange. The laughter continues to spread. not because there was something funny, but because something feels wrong. Students try to stop. They cover their mouths, they hold their breath, try to force their body still, and they fail. So this wasn't normal laughter. It came in waves also. Uncontrollable bursts that could last for hours and in some cases much longer than that. And it wasn't a joyful laugh. It was exhausting, painful. Some students were crying while they laughed. Others struggled to breathe. Some collapsed. And even when they left the room, it didn't always stop there. So imagine being a child in that room, trying to stop your own laughter while everyone around you is doing the exact same thing. The embarrassment that comes with it at first, then the confusion because you can't stop, then the terror when you finally realize that you have no control over it. That is the kind of image that sticks with you. And then it spreads from you to everyone around you, throughout the classroom, through the school. Soon, dozens of students are affected by this laughter. And once it started, it didn't spread slowly, it escalated fast. So fast, in fact, that the school shut down. But it didn't stop at the school because the students went home. And whatever this is went with them. It spread to their families, to nearby villages, to entire communities. Over 1,000 people were affected with this laughter. At least 14 schools were forced to shut down. And they,
Dang.
right. And this went on for months. And when something like this starts, time doesn't feel normal anymore. Days blur together. There's no clear beginning, no clear end. Parents are worried, teachers are frustrated, kids are scared of being the next one to lose control in front of everyone. And that social pressure matters in these cases. Because once people start watching for a symptom, they start noticing every little twitch, every strange feeling, every moment of uncertainty. And this is where something important happens. Because this kind of event doesn't jump from person to person like a virus, it builds. Someone sees it, they don't understand it. That confusion then turns to fear. That fear then turns into anticipation, watching, waiting, wondering if it could happen to them. Nothing had to be touched, nothing had to be inhaled. Just seeing it was enough. And under the right conditions, the body responds. Now, investigators did eventually step in. Medical professionals looked for viruses, toxins, neurological disorders, but they found absolutely nothing. There was no physical cause to this. And in almost every case like this, the people in charge can't stop it either. What they do find is stress, and it's extreme stress. A region that was going through major change, students that were under pressure, rigid environments, and researchers later described this as a collective stress response, where psychological strain manifests physically across an entire group. Now, that doesn't mean that the symptoms are fake. It means that the cause was something entirely different. The people were sick in a very real way. Their bodies were reacting in ways that they couldn't control. But the trigger wasn't a poison or an infection. And that's what makes this so disturbing. Because what all these cases share isn't just symptoms, it's the loss of control over your own body. And once you lose that, everything else feels uncertain too. And the Tanganyika wasn't the only place where fear and stress seemed to move through a group like a spark. Next, we're going to talk about the June bug outbreak, which was here in the US. And this was in 1962. So it's the same year, but it's a different kind of fear. So we're in a textile factory in North Carolina. Machines are humming constantly in the background. The air is thick, the work was repetitive. The kind of place where your body knows the rhythm before your mind does. Workers begin to feel a bit off. They're dizzy, nauseous, they come down with headaches. Some say they feel something crawling in their skin.
Ew.
Others claim that they've been bitten. And very quickly, a theory spreads. There's a bug. Y'all, this is where it kind of starts to go sideways. But once that idea took hold, everything changed. The factory floor became tense. People were watching each other. They're listening, waiting. Every itch feels suspicious. Every movement feels like confirmation. And then someone reacts. Then someone else. Then more. At its peak, over 60 workers were affected. Some were hospitalized. The factory shut down. Investigators had come in, they tested everything. And again, they found absolutely nothing. There was no bug, no toxin, no cause for this panic. And that's the part that people can't quite wrap their heads around because the symptoms were real. The fear and panic were both real, but the source wasn't a physical threat. Some accounts of this outbreak have been debated over the years, but the core pattern remains familiar. Once the idea of a threat took hold, distress spread rapidly through this group. And that's what makes these outbreaks so tricky. The first person might feel something genuine, and then the second person sees that reaction. Then the third hears about it before they even feel anything themselves. But by then, the room has already been primed. What investigators did find was that same similar pattern. The workers most affected were under the most stress. And once the idea of a threat took hold, it spread through everyone around them. Not physically, but psychologically. It spread, not like a disease of the body, but something closer to the mind. And if you think that sounds impossible, remember that stress itself can create real body symptoms. Headaches, dizziness, shortness of breath, a racing heart, knots in your stomach. The body does not always wait for proof before it reacts. The symptoms are real. The fear is real, but the source was something that was shared. And whether we like it or not, we're not as separate from that as we think. Because most of us would like to believe something like this couldn't happen to us, right? But the truth is, people in these cases probably thought the exact same thing. And if that feels unsettling, the next case takes it even farther. So we're going to talk about the West Bank fainting epidemic in 1983. What's that look for?
Just listening to you.
You have that look like, what the fuck?
Exactly.
So we're moving to 1983, like I said, and we're at the West Bank. And before this even starts, the atmosphere matters here. It's not a calm setting. This is a place where people are already living with uncertainty, stress, and fear. And as we've already discussed in the last two episodes, this kind of backdrop changes everything. So it begins with a few students fainting, then more, then hundreds. Classrooms should have been filled with normal conversation. Instead, they fell suddenly silent as one student collapses and then another. And then once that happens, the entire room shifts. Every sound gets louder. Every movement gets watched. Every student starts wondering if they're next. Symptoms spread across multiple schools. Fainting, dizziness, nausea, weakness, and pretty quick, people start searching for answers. Poisoning, chemical attacks. Is there something in the air? Rumors spread and fear spreads even faster. Because once people think there's a dangerous outside force, their bodies begin to react as if they're under attack. And from here on out, it only gets more intense. So entire communities had become convinced that something dangerous was happening. So, of course, parents begin to panic. Officials scramble, and the story spreads beyond the schools. And now everyone has an opinion about what is going on and what is causing it. But that belief can be contagious too. The more people believe that something is wrong, the more symptoms show up. That's the part that feels almost impossible to say out loud. Not because the symptoms aren't real, but because the mind can help shape the body's response before anyone has a clear explanation. Investigations found no physical cause, there was no toxin, and just no explanation. Researchers concluded the exact same thing: mass psychogenic illness. It was driven by stress, fear, and the environment. And that means the outbreak was not imaginary. Instead, it means that the suffering was not fake. It means that the fear moved through the group in a way that was powerful enough to create real physical symptoms. And that is why these mass hysteria stories hit so hard. Because there's no neat little villain to blame. There's no single object or single person to point your finger at. Instead, it's just the very human collision of stress, expectation, and fear. Mass psychogenic illness is when a group, for anyone that does not know, okay, if it's not been clear yet, Mass psychogenic illness is when a group of people display similar symptoms at the same time, even though doctors can't find a cause like, poison, infection, something like that. It's also called mass hysteria or epidemic hysteria, with mass hysteria being the most common thing that it's called. Now, this often shows up in settings where people are already stressed, where they're already watching each other closely, or they're worried about exposure to something dangerous. So, like COVID, that's a great example
Yeah.
for a mass
I think
hysteria.
I spent months in the house.
Right. That type of situation is the perfect breeding ground for a mass hysteria case because everyone's already freaking out and stressed, and you're watching for, people to cough and sneeze. And, you know,
It's like, ew.
yeah, that's the breeding ground for mass hysteria to just break out. Okay. Now, this can include anything, any place, any location. The primary places being schools, offices, factories, workplaces, places where people are tightly packed and highly aware of what's going on around them and those around them. Now, in these cases, people may experience headaches, dizziness, faintness, weakness, trouble breathing. We've had the meowing nuns, the dancing plague, the laughing one we just talked about, literally any kind of symptom. And they are real. These people aren't pretending. Now, once that fear spreads, the symptom can then spread with it. And that's what makes it so hard to understand for us on the outside because the body is reacting honestly. The fear the body has is real. The environment around that person or people is the fuel. And all it takes is one spark and it lights it up. Isn't that wild?
Sounds like somebody's doing some LSD.
Okay. So we're going to move to a modern comparison, okay? Because all the ones that we've talked about are old. But this still happens today.
Oh, yeah.
In LeRoy, New York, 2011. That's where we're going. So it's been a little while, but it's still modern. And just so nobody thinks this is some weird historical fluke, okay? That's why we're going to talk about it. In 2011, a group of teenage girls at LeRoy, I believe this is the one. Let me look it up. I think this is the one that they did the show about. Now I've gotten to it. I think this is the one that they did the show about.
I'm excited
Why?
because I get to watch other shows.
So the okay, yeah. So
You're being paged.
I know. Okay, so this is the one that I had talked about that they came out with.
Uh-huh.
It's called The Town That Caught Tourette's. That's the movie, and it came out in 2012.
Okay.
And it's about these teenage girls in Leroy, New York. I have not watched it yet, but that's what it's called if anybody wants to watch it. Because I've seen uh, clips of it. It looks really good. I just haven't watched it yet. You can watch it on HBO Max or Discovery Plus. Okay. Anyway, so for anyone that wants to watch it, that's where you can watch it at. Now, in 2011, a group of teenage girls at LeRoy Junior Senior High School in upstate New York started developing sudden tics, twitching, and involuntary movements, just like Tourette's. And once again, the same questions started flying around because none of these girls had any of these symptoms before. It just happened out of nowhere. So they start asking, is it a chemical exposure? Is it something in the building? Was there some kind of environmental trigger that no one had noticed yet? Parents were worried, teachers were concerned, and doctors got involved. Now, because symptoms were so visible, so sudden, and hard to explain, the story of this spread very fast. And that's the thing about these kinds of cases. Once people start paying attention, that fear becomes part of the pattern. One person gets sick, then another. Then suddenly everybody is watching everybody else, looking for the next sign that something is wrong. Investigators looked for a physical cause, of course, but the case was widely discussed as a possible example of mass psychogenic illness. Now, whether you want to call this mass hysteria, mass psychogenic illness, or something else entirely, the reality is the same. The
Yeah.
symptoms were real, the distress was real, and the panic around it was entirely real. I mean, they made a whole freaking movie about it, for God's sakes. So this makes this modern case very unsettling because it's not just some dusty old story from the past. It's something that can still happen today in a classroom full of kids, in a community, in a workplace, anywhere that fear has room to spread. And so that's why this whole topic that we've talked about for the last couple weeks is hard to sit with because there's no neat little boundary around it. It doesn't stay in one place. It doesn't always start with something dramatic. Sometimes it starts with a single person feeling off. Then it grows because everyone around them is trying to make sense of what it is that they're seeing. That's how these outbreaks become so strange. It's not just the symptoms, it's the way that they're watched, interpreted, and repeated in a room full of people who are already on edge. Now, if you think about the settings where these outbreaks happen, it makes a lot of sense. Schools, factories, communities under pressure, places where people are already tired, already stressed, and already paying close attention to each other. Those types of environments are perfect for shared panic because everybody is tuned in to everybody else. Everybody's on the same wavelength.
That's almost scary.
If one person suddenly acts strange, it doesn't stay private for long. It becomes the thing that everybody is talking about, that they're looking at, that they're worried about, and that attention can make the whole atmosphere even heavier than it was before. That's why investigators often have such a hard time in these cases, because by the time they arrive, the outbreak has already changed shape. People have heard the rumors, they've assigned meaning to the symptoms, they started connecting dots that may or may not actually be there. And once that happens, the original event is almost impossible to separate from the fear around it. You're no longer just explaining what happened. You're trying to untangle what happened from everything people believe
Trying to
happened.
make sense of it.
Right, exactly. Because it's like a game of telephone. All these rumors and fear and panic spread.
I always loved that game.
I know, me too. And so now you're trying to figure out like what actually started it, you know? Makes it really hard. Now, these two things are very different. What happened and what people believe happened. But the thing that really gets me is that none of it requires anyone to be faking. Because sometimes when people hear mass hysteria or mass psychogenic illness, they think it means that it's made up. And that's not necessarily true. Everything is real in these cases. In one, people were laughing until they couldn't breathe, until they were fainting in classrooms, they were twitching in hallways and genuinely believing something dangerous was happening to them. That is what gives these things power, not deception, but belief in it. Now, belief is a strange thing. It can calm a room down just as easily as it can set one off. It can make people feel safe, but it can also make them feel trapped. It can tell us with absolute certainty that we're in danger, even when no one can find the danger itself. And that's why stories like this keep showing up across different places and in different decades. People, human beings are social creatures. We watch one another. We mirror one another. We borrow each other's fears without even realizing that we're doing it. I think that's why stories like this stay with people long after the fact. Because they leave you with that uncomfortable question in the back of your mind. How much of what we feel is actually ours? And how much of it comes from the people around us? How many times have we stepped into a room and immediately known something was off before anyone ever said a word? How many times have we felt our own anxiety spike just because somebody else looked scared? That's a very human experience. And in these cases, it just becomes magnified. And maybe that's what makes these outbreaks so haunting. They don't have to be supernatural to feel unbelievable. They don't need a monster in the corner or a shadow moving across the wall. They just need pressure. They just need fear. They just need enough people in the same place at the same time, trying to make sense of something that no one can explain. And once that happens, the whole room can start to feel like it's slipping out of control. So when you look back at Tanzania, the June bug outbreak, the West Bank fainting epidemic, and the more modern LeRoy, New York, the lesson isn't that people are weak or irrational. It's that people are human. And being human means being vulnerable to the emotions and the reactions of the people that are all around us. It means our bodies and brains don't always draw a clean line between what's physical and what's psychological. It means fear can feel contagious because, in a lot of ways, it is. And that's the part that I want to leave you with. Not because it has a tidy answer, but simply because it doesn't. These stories remind us that sometimes the scariest thing in the room isn't something lurking in the dark. Sometimes it's the shared silence after somebody gets scared. Sometimes it's the look on everyone's face when nobody knows what's happening. Sometimes it's the moment where a group realizes they're all reacting to the same invisible pressure. And that, to me, is what makes these cases the most terrifying. And that's all I have.
That's some weird stuff.
It's crazy how the brain works, doesn't it?
My brain don't work half the time, so
Oh my god. Like it's just it's wild. Like we as a human species, right? Think that we know all there is to know about the human body, all there is to know about the brain, but we don't.
the brain is very mysterious.
Mhm.
I mean, you see it all the time where people have been in comas for years, and all of a sudden their brain starts working.
Yep. They've been brain dead and then all of a sudden here it is. It's why and then your brain can do things like this. Simply because one person is scared, everybody else's brains are like, "Oh, there's something to be afraid of. We got to react to it." It's wild to me. I find it very interesting, but that's just
It's
me.
crazy.
Right. Anyway, that's it. That's all I got for our mass hysteria cases for now anyway.
That's all I got.
You ready for next week?
I guess. What's next week?
All right. We're heading into a story that feels very different from this one, but it's just as unforgettable. It starts with a young woman far from home, surrounded by people she trusted, in a place that should have felt temporary and exciting. Just another night, just another moment. Nothing anyone thought would turn into a nightmare. But then she disappears. And what's left behind is confusion, silence, and a search that only seems to open up more questions the deeper it goes. Because this one is one of those cases where every answer leads to another question. Where the timeline gets messier the more you look at it, where the people closest to her are forced to relive the same night over and over again, trying to figure out what went wrong, what was missed, and what could have changed everything. And the hardest part is that once the disappearance happens, the story doesn't end there. It keeps going. It gets wider, it gets darker, and it leaves behind a trail of grief, suspicion, and questions that have never really gone away. And just like today, it doesn't stay contained for long. And that's it. That's next week. What do you think? You got any ideas? You got any guesses?
No.
I know it's very broad, isn't it?
Yeah,
Doesn't really narrow it down.
it didn't help.
Well, it's a she, the female. She goes missing in a crowd of people.
I've heard about that stuff.
Hmm.
It's crazy.
It's a good one. You're gonna be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you're doing this one." Everybody's gonna be excited. Oh yeah.
I can tell by the look in your face that you're excited.
Oh yeah. This one was a big one for a long time. So next week's episode might be a little long, as usual.
Yeah, we'll get talking and get off track.
Well, not just that, but I kind of dug into it. This one, yep. Okay. I can't tell you too much because then it'll give away. I'm just gonna. Okay. That's it, guys. That's all we got. Thanks for coming and hanging out with us this week. You can find all of our socials linked in the episode description, along with our email for case suggestions and listener tales you'd like read on the show. Please leave us a rating and a review. While you're doing that, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on download so you never miss an episode. And as always, remember to
Watch out for monsters.
don't kill people, and we'll catch y'all next time. Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.
This episode is sponsored by Invisaware, discreet safety jewelry and accessories that can instantly alert your trusted contacts and show your location with just a click. No subscriptions, no hassle. Just added peace of mind. Get 10% off your order at invisaware.com/monstrous10.